The plus that's put forward religiously by polytheists, which is a word that comes from two different statements, poly, which means many, and theist, which is reference to God. The belief in multiple gods and the advantage that the polytheist has, which is generally the majority of those who adhere to Odinism, is that you come across, and if you come across a god that does something you don't like, there's always a second or a third or a fourth option available to you. When the appeal of Asatru claims that the gods partner with us and their followers are ultimately pursuing the same agendas, the reality is that regardless of which one you pick, it's just as unpleasant a picture regardless of which god you pick. And in order to properly understand this, we're going to clarify not only what a god is, but what these gods ultimately were, and why this has some implications when it comes to not only choosing gods other than Odin, but any of the gods in the Norse pantheon in general. So, starting with that first statement, what is a god? Well, the word means one with power, and in the ultimate sense, it would be the ultimate power or authority in existence. Morality is centered around their nature, reality is determined by their whim. Obedience to this authority is the greatest fulfillment we can experience, and by recognizing this being as God, you're also recognizing everything else as a lesser power that ultimately answers to them. Now, these are the fundamentals to theology and also the core of any coherent understanding of what God means. And if, according to Asatru, you have the gods as your kin, the reason you'd follow any god, let alone the Norse gods, is because you truly believe that their authority is not only absolute over your life, but in light of their nature, will bring you the most fulfillment in life. This is true of any religion, regardless of the number of gods that they have. A good example of this is that if a pagan chooses to worship Odin, he falls in line with the Prose Eddas, which is cited Gylfaginning, in the description that is given of him not only by Snorri Sturluson but by the individuals in the rankings of Gylfi, and noting that he bears the title of Allfather for the following reasons. This is Gylfaginning section 3. Ganglir asks again, where is this god? What can he do? What mighty works has he accomplished? This is in reference to Odin. Answered Har, he lives from everlasting to everlasting, rules over all his realm, and governs all things great and small. Then remarked Jafnar, he made heaven and earth, the air, and all things in them. Thirdi added, what is most important, he made man, and gave him a spirit, which shall live and never perish, though the body may turn to dust or burn to ashes. All who live a life of virtue shall dwell with him in Gimli or Vingolf. The wicked, on the other hand, go to hell, the underworld is a general term, and from there to Nilfhel, which is the actual place of punishment in Norse mythology. That is down to the ninth world. Then ask Ganglir, what was he doing before heaven and earth were made? Har gave the answer, then he was with the frost giants. So we have a pre-existent, eternal, sovereign creator who bears the ultimate authority and whose determination of virtue will decide if you go to hell, and by extension Nilfhel, or to be with him in Gimli or Vingolf. So appealing to this one's good whims, I guess would be the proper term. To pursue a positive relationship with him, to use Christian terms, would be the most objective and constructive use of your time in this life. Since he, as God, bears the ultimate power, this title of Allfather sets him aside from all the other Azir, all the other powers. So he would be the ultimate, according to the Norse sources themselves. But what are the gods as alternatives to Odin? There are plenty, but I'll cite off the three main ones that are known thanks to Marvel Studios and comics. Freya, who is also referred to as Frigg, would be the embodiment of fertility and desire. She would be known as a hedonist's god. The pursuit of her ideal is the pursuit of pleasure and of beauty, because these most embody and reflect her nature. Thor is the embodiment of martial prowess and accomplishment. He made the biggest home. He slayed the most giants. He lifts the heaviest hammer. It was a cultural mark of a great chieftain back then. He was able to eat the most food, and on it goes. but he would be a warrior's god, as the Norse culture would epitomize it. And the pursuit of his ideal would be the pursuit of strength. The stronger you are, the more you reflect the nature and character of your god. Loki is the embodiment of mischief. He is a trickster or a prankster's god. The pursuit of his ideal is the pursuit of whims over consequence. Now, understand what I mean by that. A prankster's goal is always to make sure that he not only does what he wants to do, and having a bit of fun even at others' expense, but at to the least cost to himself as possible. Now, with these paragons pointed out, and we can talk about others, but these will be the points we'll be making today. What does following these gods look like compared to Odin for the Odinist? Well, by following less than Odin, let's just put this out here as what was already stated before, by choosing to follow anything less than the Allfather, is rejecting the concept of God entirely. By making someone less than the ultimate power and authority in your own religion, is proactively choosing something less than the best in order to meet a spiritual need as well as the foundation for your life. So it's already a losing battle. But continuing on, by following Freya, what is the problem with this sort of outlook, this sort of ideal, this sort of paragon in light of the world we live in today? Well, by following Freya and making things like beauty and pleasure your standard for what is good and what is not that good, is living in a world that reflects the opposite. If the ultimate authority in your view is a being that desires things to feel and to look good, then why do we see so much disgusting and painful things taking place across the world? Christianity has an answer for this. We are separate from that standard and source. But if Odinism is true and no separation has taken place, that Freya and those who follow her are actively pursuing and enforcing this sort of will on the world, that things should feel good, that things should look beautiful, why aren't they? These would be failings on her part, showing that even she can't enforce and establish her agenda on this world. And note the point here. Your God is your paragon, your ultimate standard, your highest authority. And if your standard can't change this world in an ultimate sense, then doesn't that make your efforts in a temporary sense just as pointless as hers in a divine sense? If your goddess can't do the things that she wants to do, then how do you think that you can hope to accomplish them? This is a dilemma for the follower of Freya. Perhaps setting that aside, and among other things, you might choose Thor, the Vikings god, the warrior, the expeditionist god, the one who wants to demonstrate and prove his martial prowess not only to the other Aesir, but to his fellow countrymen as well. That's why these expeditions, this word Viking means one who goes on an expedition, wanted to prove. But here's the point. By making the pursuit of strength your goal, your ultimate paragon, your ultimate standard for authority and purpose in life, understand the problem here. You are depending on yourself to achieve what is supposed to be only possible by the mightiest Aesir by definition. You don't have a god if you worship Thor. You're trying to either replace your god or fail. And if you have such a high view of Thor that you not only would follow him over his mother, father, brothers, and sisters, all as a whole, you either are going to say, you know what, Thor is the epitome, the ultimate strength even among the gods, but my pursuit is to be like him. Understand the problem that's being presented there. You either would then have to have not just a high view of Thor, but such a high view of yourself to be able to accomplish that goal, that your strength may one day even surpass your God among all others, or, catch this, you are signing up for a system that will ultimately fail. And the question is, why sign up for a system that is either, if you're honest and acknowledge I will never be as strong as Thor, will fail, or to say, because Thor is the pursuit of strength in the practical pursuit of that theological life, I will one day surpass him. You either need a minimalist view of your God, in which case he wouldn't be your God, you would be your God and hope to eliminate him as competition, Or you would be saying, I can't pursue this God, and it's pointless from the start. Then finally with Loki, by making the avoidance of consequences and the pursuit of self-entertainment, of course, but that is the emphasis I want to point out here, the avoidance of consequences as your goal, you're following the example of a being that couldn't even meet his own ideal. For those of you who know, Loki is currently in hell, having snake venom poured on his face and causing earthquakes whenever his wife is unable to collect them, according to the prose Edis. And if even your God couldn't get away with murder, what makes you think that you can? Your ultimate example is a warning, not a calling. Why follow him if he failed to do what is supposed to be what he's the best in existence at? Your God can't meet his own standard, but let's even just go down to the foundation, and I'll conclude with this. The foundational ethics, according to Odinism, or Asatru as it's defined today, are courage, truth, honor, fidelity, discipline, hospitality, self-reliance, industriousness, and perseverance. Now, following any of these gods excludes one or more of these things. And if your own gods couldn't meet their own standards, then why follow them? If we're going to look at fidelity, every single one of these gods, Odin included, cheated on their spouses. If we're going to look for truth, they all compromise this standard at one time or another. You can say out of necessity, but if you make them the paragon and standard for why these things are virtuous, because they are the authority that set them, why follow them if they can't keep it? If you're looking for honor, Thor and Freya and Loki especially have all done dishonorable things. Fidelity and discipline, that falls hand in hand. Going for hospitality and so forth, you can say that some were demonstrated more than others. I'll allow that for the time being. We can go through these one by one in a separate video. But self-reliance, industriousness, perseverance, all these things sound virtuous, but the standard by which you call them virtue couldn't even meet them. And this is the point. If following any of the gods ultimately excludes one, if not all of these, my recommendation isn't to follow a god that can't even be called God based on your desires. I would recommend rather that you pursue a god that not only meets his own standards, but desires you. I can't say that this is the case for any of the Azir in a definitive sense, but I can point you to Jesus Christ, who does for certain. If you have sincere questions and want to know more about perhaps the demonstrations, citations, and applications for how Norse pagans would have to point to their gods as these examples and yet failures in these own virtues, where we come up with these conclusions or how I'm approaching the text, please let me know in the comments below. The only standard is sincerity. If you act like adults, they'll treat you like adults, but make sure that that's your goal first and foremost, to have a discussion, not just to throw out insults and return them back. I want to engage with you. I want to discuss not only why you believe that there is a God, but why I have chosen Jesus Christ, not only as the only true God, but because by his standards they not only reflect reality, but his own nature consistently as well. I'll look forward to discussing these with you all, as well as other topics about Odinism in the future. But until then, remember that Jesus loves you and he has far more to offer you than these sort of gods that, while they present themselves as alternatives, aren't even as good as the main and ultimate example that is found in Odin, and when compared to the God of the Bible, falls hilariously short. I'll see you all next time.